It's delightful to have you here for the Girls on Track UK community virtual event. And Nathalie McGloin is, I don't know how it's laid out on yours, but she's just above me. Hello.
Hi.
So I suppose that the first and best thing I should do really is say hello, I'm Jennie Gow. Delighted to be hosting this Q&A today. If you want to get in touch, please do feel free to ask any questions that you have on the Q&A functionality below. I think we've all done Zoom webinars quite a lot now, but if you're new to it, there's plenty of things just down below that you can utilize to either chat or to ask a Q&A. So please feel free to do that. The next thing I shall do is introduce you to the lovely Nathalie McGloin. Nathalie, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar. It's delightful to have you here. And the first thing I wanted to do really was ask you to introduce yourself to everybody and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Of course, I'm so happy to be part of this. So thank you very much for having me. So as you said, Jennie, my name is Nathalie McGloin. I am the only female tetraplegic in the world to have any kind of motorsport license. And just for those that don't know, a tetraplegic is someone who's broken their neck and has a spinal injury. Most people will be familiar with the term paraplegic. Tetraplegic just means that the paralysis affects parts of their arms as well. So I've got limited hand function because of my disability. So I work for the FIA. I'm the president of the Disability and Accessibility Commission. I also work for Motorsport UK as the disabled motorsport consultant, and I run a charity called Spinal Track, and we give opportunities to disabled novices who haven't before participated in track or rally driving. And I also race my Porsche Cayman S as well. So hopefully that's a good enough intro.
It's a brilliant intro. Thank you so much. And hopefully it gives everybody a real idea of why it's so fascinating to be hearing from you tonight and to listen to what you have to say about, I suppose, the thing that we all love, which is motorsport, but so much more, because there is so much more to you. So can we start at the very beginning? Is that all right? And just take you back. Where did you grow up and what were you interested in as a child? Was motorsport always kind of there on the radar?
Absolutely not. So I was born in Chertsey and lived kind of that way, Gatwick. I was in Gatwick until I was 11, and then my mum's family from East Yorkshire. So we moved to Bridlington, which is a small seaside town on the Yorkshire coast, where I grew up and did my kind of main kind of teenage years. Well, all of my teenage years really. I moved there when I was 11 and then went to university when I was 19. But when I was 16 is when I was in the car crash that caused me to have my spinal injury. But kind of before and after that, when I was at school and doing my A-levels, I had no interest in motorsport. I had never watched a Formula One race. I didn't know anything about the sport at all. No family members were interested. It kind of grew organically just from, I guess, when I went to university, I was kind of looking for independence. You know, every 19-year-old, 18-year-old who goes to university, I think, looks for independence when you first move away from home, whether you're at university or you've just moved from home for the first time. And for me, driving was a massive factor with my independence because public transport wasn't massively accessible for me as a full-time wheelchair user. So I got my license when I was 20, I think, and driving was just something that I kind of really enjoyed, and it kind of developed from there, and I began driving fast road cars, and then I was introduced to track days, which was a slippery slope onto the journey into motorsport. But yeah, had I not broken my neck, I definitely wouldn't be racing cars today. That's an absolute fact.
So I suppose breaking your neck is kind of a big deal when it happens. Do you want to share with people how it happened?
Yeah, so just wrong place, wrong time. So one of our friends had recently passed his test, And it was 2 weeks into sixth form, and you know, it's like at sixth form you have free periods, you think, yay, I can do anything I want to in my free period. So we went to my best friend's house, who lived in like the neighbouring village, and on the way back just went over the brow of a hill. An elderly couple were turning into their driveway, and the driver tried to avoid the car, and we left the road and hit a tree. So like, no one's fault really, just these things happen on the road. So yeah, I mean, pretty big deal. Going from completely independent to someone who was kind of heavily reliant on medical staff, and being completely dependent on everyone else to do everything for me, and a full-time wheelchair user and paralysed from the chest down. It's quite a blow when you're 16, but I wasn't going to let it determine how I lived my life, and I was absolutely adamant that I was going to go back to school and get my A levels and go to university, because that's what my plan was, and I wasn't going to let my spinal injury change that. So that's what I did. And you know, it was tough going back to school. I'd definitely say it's one of the bravest things I ever did. Just, you know, last time I'd been there, my first day back after breaking my neck, you know, I'd walked out of there a year earlier, and I was suddenly back there in a chair. And I just, you know, you can imagine at 17 years old how daunting that must have felt. But I knew as soon as I got into my classroom that I was going to be okay, and that that's what I needed to do, and that the staff and my friends would support me. And it was my route out of like my hometown, because I kind of felt that I had like a past life and then my new life, and I didn't really want to be that person. I wanted a fresh start, and I knew that university would give me that. So I worked really hard to get there, and I'm so glad that I did, because I think most people say university is the best days of your life, really. Such a good time. So yeah, it was the right choice, and I'm glad I did it.
It must have been quite hard not to let that accident define who you were, and kind of let it overcome you, I suppose, at that stage of your life.
Yeah, and I think, you know, it's quite easy to let any life-changing injury or situation just overwhelm you, and for it to stop you from doing what you love. But, you know, I was really fortunate that I had friends and family around me who would give me the support that I needed to push forward. I mean, my mum is a massively strong, independent person, and she gave me some tough love when I first was injured, which I really needed, because, you know, if I'd been wrapped up in cotton wool, I could have easily just lulled into self-pity and not wanted to do anything, which I think no one would have judged me for. But she didn't. She made sure that I got the best out of myself, and you know, I'm really grateful for that now, because I think that probably is the making of my tenacity now. My dad, equally supportive, all my family, my brother and my sister, and my friends as well, who just, you know, held my hand, and we just did the normal things that we used to do before. So yeah, I'm definitely like privileged that I had that support network around me that allowed me to do the things that I wanted to do, and to achieve what I wanted to achieve.
And for anyone who's got questions, we will do some questions in a minute. I promise it's not just going to be me talking to Nathalie. We're going to involve you as much as we possibly can. But so use the Q&A at the bottom. But I just wanted to set it up so people know all about you and what you've achieved, because to go from an accident like that and to have the support of everybody around you to go off to university is one thing, but then to turn your life into what is now an ambassador for disability and motorsport is quite something else. So tell me how you ended up driving Porsche and working for the FIA and becoming this huge champion.
Yeah, it is. I still think it's crazy that this has happened. So at university, actually, when I was in rehab at the Spinal Rehab Centre, I was introduced to a sport called wheelchair rugby. And when I went to university, one of my ambitions was to start the sport, because I was really weak physically and, you know, mentally, and I knew that I needed something to give me a bit of strength so that I could capitalise on the independence that I'd built from the rehab unit. And wheelchair rugby then became my full-time occupation. I ended up taking my final year of university. I studied English and French, but then went to English in the second year because I realised I wasn't very good at French.
Bonjour.
For the FIA, but I mean, I loved studying it, but I just fell behind a little bit in the first year and thought that English was a better option for me. So I took my final years over 2 years, as I really wanted to break into the Paralympic squad with rugby. And when I'd graduated, I moved down to London to play for the best team in the country at the time, to further those chances of going to what I hoped would be Beijing, and then I hoped would be London, and neither of those things happened. So with sport, you know, that it's, the highs are very high, but the lows are very low. And it was through a wheelchair rugby teammate just shortly after I'd moved down to London that I was introduced to track days. I had Porsche 911 and he had a BMW M3, and he told me that his car was faster than mine. And
what a mistake.
But at the time I knew nothing about cars, and I thought, this can't be true. I have a Porsche, he has a BMW. How on earth would that be faster than my car? So he said, well, come on a track day and we'll test out the theory. And I went to my first track day and I absolutely fell in love with it. It was just, you know, the adrenaline, and I developed this passion for cars just on the road with the independence, and also the fact that when I was in a car, you couldn't see my chair. So not that, you know, I was ashamed of it, but sometimes, you know, like to be the same as everyone else and not stand out, and the car gave me that. So these track days and the fact that I was able to do this at the same time as able-bodied people, track days just became an expensive hobby, a very expensive hobby. Yeah. Whilst I was training for the Paralympic squad, or trying to break onto the Paralympic squad. But in 2012, I suffered an injury that would take me out of wheelchair rugby for 9 months. And when I went back to try and reclaim that position on the squad, I just didn't have the same passion for rugby that I'd had before. It had changed, and I knew I needed that to be the athlete that I wanted to be. So I decided that I would have a look into getting my racing license, and then that's how that journey began. And at the beginning, it was just going to be like my degree, something that I had achieved to show that I'd done it, and it would just be the license. And then before I knew it, I'd bought the Cayman and I'd entered into the Porsche Club Championship, and as they say, the rest is history.
I love that kind of just, oops, I had a Porsche, and oops, I was racing it. Oh well. So tell me, Maxine Hart's been in touch, and she's asked, Natalie, what did you study at university? So before we get into the racing bit, maybe we can just talk about the university and what you did there.
So just going back to A-levels, so I did English, French and history at A-level, and then general studies in my final year. So when I went to university, I did French and English studies, which is different to English language because it includes subjects like linguistics and some of the more like scientific English subjects, which I really like. I hated literature, which probably think I shouldn't have done English, but the speech analysis and stuff was stuff that I was really interested in. So yeah, that's what I did at uni.
Excellent. Okay. We do have lots of questions coming in. Just a reminder that this webinar is being recorded, so it will be made available after the event. So if you're watching after the event, hello to you. It's going to be on the Girls on Track UK community Facebook page. So there's plenty of places to watch it, and your Q&As keep coming in. So thank you very much. Louise Ann asks, can motorsport realistically support personnel with disabilities? Absolutely.
I genuinely wouldn't be working towards a goal if I didn't think it was achievable. So I think, you know, there are lots of people involved in motorsport with disabilities currently. I think that the reason that there aren't more is because we're not championing the people that are already involved. So I think it's difficult for people with disabilities to aspire to do something if they haven't already seen it being done. It's a bit like women in motorsport. You know, if young girls aren't seeing girls racing, women racing, then how do they have those aspirations to be that person? So with the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission, we are not only looking at legislation change and making motorsport more accessible with rules and regulations and opening up opportunities, but also by highlighting what people are already doing. Because there are a lot of people that race with disabilities. There are a lot of disabled marshals, volunteers and officials, and there are people that work in motorsport with disabilities as well. They just don't shout about it, because I think in motorsport, having a disability is fairly irrelevant in terms of the competition anyway. Me competing against able-bodied men just proves that. Different when you're talking about marshals and other roles, but again, I think that we are a sport that is so inclusive. We almost don't need to have any subsections for it. So I think that the more that we highlight disabled people doing what we're doing in motorsport, the more we can uncover where the problem areas are and how to fix them. And then more disabled people can become involved. So absolutely, I think we can make motorsport much more accessible than it already is.
I think a lot of people are quite keen to know attitudes towards you and whether they've changed at all, because obviously when you first started, you're very much doing it on your own, and now you're part of the FIA umbrella and some greater organisations. So have those attitudes changed because of that, or have they changed because actually people are just getting better at this stuff?
I don't think they have changed, or if they have, I haven't noticed it. I've never experienced any kind of negativity towards me as a disabled driver or a female driver. Once, like from my first race till the last race I competed in, when I'm out on track, no one treats me any differently. You know, if someone wants to beat me, they'll take the nose off my car. If that's how they drive, they won't, you know, tread on eggshells around me because they think, oh, well, you know, she's a disabled driver. And why should they? You know, I compete on level terms. I want the same respect that the other drivers get. And almost if they don't grant the other drivers the respect, then just because I'm disabled doesn't mean I should have that. So yeah, and in the paddock as well, in the pits, I do find that people are interested in my disability, but because it affects the way I drive the car. I drive with hand controls and I have different adaptations that allow me to compete. That's the thing that people are the most interested in, you know, because your legs don't work. They don't necessarily understand how then I can drive a car. So they want to come and have a look at the setup and ask questions, and that's great. So I like, from me being just me competing in my first ever race to now being the president of the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission, I am not aware of any attitudes that have changed towards me, if they have.
Well, I suppose that's a positive, because I suppose some people would automatically assume that you were treated differently, A, because you're female, B, because you happen to be disabled as well. But it's really, I suppose, enlightening and heartwarming to know that's not needed to be the case. Now, another question coming in. How did you transition from amateur to pro racing, and did your sponsors change or follow during that transition?
Okay, just to clarify, I'm not a pro racer. I think a lot of people get confused with this. So professional drivers is a small percentage of people right at the very top. And they are people like works drivers, driving for manufacturers, or people that get paid. I think I understand where that question has come from. And I think it's just a case of, once the big sponsors came on board, did it change? And yes, I mean, my main sponsor, Stanley Black & Decker, when they started to take notice of me and then they started to come on board as a sponsor, I think my attitude towards it changed, because I thought, if these guys believe in me, then I must be doing something right. And I think that also helped. I had an awful season in 2017. I crashed my car pretty badly before the first race of the season, and for the rest of the season, we tried to work out what the problem was, which we did find. We found out what the cause of the crash was, but the car just wasn't straight and it would behave in a weird way every time I tested it. And I had a massive crisis of confidence because I just thought, this is me, it's not the car, it's me. You know, I've lost the ability to drive. And then having all of my sponsors kind of on my car, on my kit, did give me the support that I needed, not financially, but like almost just like a silent hand holding to just say, you know, we're supporting you, we're believing in you, we know that you can get through this. And I don't know if that had happened in the first season when I didn't have any sponsors, whether I'd still carried on. And I know that's quite a big thing to say, but it was that bad that I was really, really struggling. So I think you've got to always have self-belief in yourself, but I think when others believe in you, it just reinforces that. So I think that's how my racing has changed since those companies have come on board.
How did you go about getting sponsors?
See, this is like the question that I get asked all the time, and I don't know the answer to it.
That's amazing.
I know. When I first started racing, I thought people are going to be knocking down my door. I'm one of one. The publicity that I can generate will be huge. It won't be an issue. And how naive of me. So a few sponsors came on in my second season, and then my main sponsor, Stanley Black & Decker, they saw, and sorry if I'm plugging them, I don't mean to, it's just they're my biggest sponsor, so I have to talk about them because otherwise it just, you know, it's just a
part of the story as well.
Yeah. Well, they saw something I was doing with Spinal Track on Facebook. We were with Spinal Track, my charity, we were looking for a second car, and we put out a Just Giving page, and the CMO of Stanley Black & Decker, it popped up for some reason on his feed. We hadn't put any paid publicity behind it or anything. We just literally put it out there. And I got a Facebook message from one of the guys there saying, "Hi, this is so-and-so from Stanley Black & Decker. We'd like to have a phone call with you." And I was just like, who is this? This is surely someone's pulling my leg. And yeah, we jumped on a call, and they said, you know, how would you feel if we came on board with some support for both your racing and your charity? And again, I was like, surely, like, look up these people's names, because I think someone's having a big joke here. And they saw what I was doing. They saw what I was doing with Spinal Track, and they liked it and they wanted to help. So I think half of the battle with sponsorship is luck. And I think if you put yourself out there enough and you have a good, strong, positive social media presence, the likelihood of that luck being in your favor is more positive, because, you know, the more you're talked about, the more you're seen, the more likelihood a company is going to be exposed to you. And then it's up to them, or the luck side of it, whether they like what you're doing or it falls in with their brand values. So yeah, it's not an exact science. I think it's a combination of hard work and luck, but I think social media is key.
Okay, Lucy Rebecca Brazy has been in touch. She says, "Hi Natalie, you mentioned track days being expensive. I work in inclusion sport, and I wondered if you had any other ideas for making motorsport in general as a casual competitor more accessible. Finance is, of course, a huge one." Yeah,
finance is a problem for all drivers. I think even if you have all the money in the world and the best sponsors in the world, you always want more. So I think, you know, you're racing very like stock cars, or, you know, cars that cost a few £100 or cars that cost a few £100,000. You still want to go to the next level. But making motorsport more accessible, I think there are so many different facets to motorsport. It's not just about the driving, it's about the volunteers and officials, it's about working for teams, it's about being, I think motorsport is being about being involved with a sport that we all love. So I think that some of the kind of barriers that are finance based, if you think outside the box a little bit and try, and if you can't afford to get into motorsport as a driver, then get into it another way, because there are always opportunities. You know, you might be in the paddock helping a team or being a marshal and express the desire to want to go racing or do something different, and someone might just overhear you that wants to help and has the means to, or has a company that wants to be promoted. I think get a foot in the door. Motorsport is expensive, but it is a sport of opportunity. So get in somehow and work your way up. I don't know whether that was the answer to the question, but
yeah, I feel that. Yeah, absolutely. I feel so. I mean, there are lots of people asking about funding and how to get funding. I think, as you say, that's across motorsport in general. Even Lewis Hamilton in his contract negotiations is going to go for more money. Does he need it? Probably not. There's a question here saying, given the increased awareness and the conversations regarding diversity, equity and inclusion, or equality and inclusion, how can we make the most of it? And I think that is quite an important, the timing of that is quite important.
Yeah, I think we have a platform now for all of these different subjects. And I think that people are willing to listen at the moment, and companies are willing to stick their necks out and be involved with this. And I think whereas before it was a case of some companies just box ticking, I think that companies really want to make a difference. So I think how we make the most of it is we really start shouting about it now. Whichever kind of facet of EDI you fall into, if you've got a voice and you've got a cause, I think you have to start telling people why it's important. I can't tell enough people why motorsport is so important to disabled people. And I think that the FIA are doing such a great job of going forward with this. I mean, you know, that my commission is now nearly 3 years old. So it started in 2018. So is that 2 or 3 years old?
Well, it's 2, but going for 3.
I didn't study maths at university.
Nor did I. I didn't go to university. I've got no hope.
But I think, you know, when the governing bodies, Motorsport UK are really pushing this as well. And I think when the governing bodies are starting to do this, that's when you really know that change is going to happen. So I just think, make your voice heard. People are listening. This is how we make the most of it.
Rachel Steinberg says, hi Natalie, can you tell us a bit about developing the certificate of adaptations for drivers and how it's been going since you introduced it?
So the certificate of adaptations was introduced actually off the back of a meeting that I had with Alex Zanardi. So Alex was competing in Daytona 24. And I went testing, or I wish I went testing in his car. I went to his test session in the south of France. And I was speaking to the team, and they were telling me how, because obviously the IMSA is not a homologated championship, but obviously it falls under specific regulations. And Alex's car fell outside of those regulations with the controls that were put on that car for him to be able to drive it. And there were various conversations going about how they actually then either qualified those controls so that they were, you know, assessed by someone and given some kind of legitimacy. And one of the suggestions was putting him in a separate class. So making it completely pointless for him to race because he couldn't win. He couldn't even do anything. He would just be in the class of his own, termed something, I don't know what they would have termed it, but I'd heard things like this happening from other disabled racers. And I said, what if a certificate could sit alongside any homologation papers that were needed, or any criteria from a championship that had been approved by the FIA in terms of sportingness, so making sure that there wasn't an unfair advantage gained, and safety, so someone having assessed the controls to make sure they were safe. And the consensus was, well, that would be the answer to the question. So we started this in the beginning of last year, so that homologated cars could be adapted without losing their homologation, or championships that needed specific legislation following, that the adaptations then didn't make that possible, having this certificate so that they could compete on level terms with everyone else, just in the class that they would have been had they not had the adaptations. And yeah, it's been going really well. We've had a few applications this year. Obviously COVID has slowed everything down, so there haven't been as many as we would have expected. But yeah, I mean, we've had a few teething problems, but legislation change, that happens. You know, you've got to ride out the bumps at the beginning. But I do think this is really a really important thing that we've created to enable disabled drivers to A, be taken seriously, and B, to be put in the class that they should have been had they not been disabled. So it's going well on overall.
I'm gonna absolutely butcher this name, and I don't even know if it's French or Portuguese. It's beautiful, but I know I'm gonna mess it up, so I apologize right now. Real Penot, I'm gonna go with that. Thank you for getting in touch anyway. And they say, tell us more about your mandate and mission at the FIA.
So the point of the Disability and Accessibility Commission is to make motorsport more accessible without compromising on safety. And that's what we fall back on every time we have a new initiative or a new idea. Does it fall under this criteria? And we've done various things in the 2 years that we've been a commission. So we've put forward the Disabled Drivers Grant, which gives people who have a disability that causes them to need extra time in exiting the car unaided, or it affects their ability to exit the car unaided, and it gives them a grant for the highest level safety gear, so the fire extinguisher, the safety fuel cell, and the fireproof clothing, so that that disabled driver competes in the safest possible environment. We've done other things. So the accessible podiums is something that we're really hoping to kick off in earnest next year, which has the ambition of making all Formula 1 and Formula E circuits accessible, with the hope that it filters down to other circuits in those countries as well. The certificate of adaptations, which I chatted about previously, as well as legislation change, because when I came into the FIA, some of the legislation that is contained in Appendix L of the International Sporting Code was very outdated, and you could see some of the legislation had specifically been put in there for individual drivers. I could see clauses that had been put in there specifically to allow Alex Zanardi to compete. So we took everything out and just replaced it, or left stuff in that was relevant, or just made it more sensible. And so that's ever evolving as we learn more about disabled motorsport and what people's needs are. But if I'm to talk about what I hate beefing things up, but if you asked me what would my legacy be with the commission, I want to make motorsport so accessible that disabled children watch the Formula 1 and say, Mum, Dad, that's what I want to be when I'm older. Because we will have made motorsport so accessible that that is a reality. And that if I can achieve that, I will have made myself proud, I think. And I think it is wholly achievable.
I have so many questions that I want to ask off the back of that. The first one, I suppose, is how accessible are tracks?
It depends which country you live in, which isn't great. I think it falls back onto disabled legislation within particular countries. In the UK, we are really lucky. As a disabled person, I am so lucky that I live in the UK because everything is catered for me. It might not be ideal all of the time, but if you go to other countries around the world, they don't have anything somewhere, some places. So tracks in the UK are really good. MSV tracks are excellent. Silverstone is excellent. Most of the other tracks as well are very accessible. And I've seen actually changes since I've been racing. things like accessible showers and bathrooms in campsites and different bits and pieces. Not that I camp, because I'm way too much of a prima donna to do that. But
the honesty comes out.
But you know, I've seen changes just for disabled people attending races in any capacity that make circuits more accessible. So circuits are very good in this country. Other countries, I mean, I've been to the Spa Grand Prix before I was involved in motorsport, and I mean, you think Europe would be pretty good. It was shocking. We had to push across gravel to get to the accessible seating stand, and when I say gravel, I mean thick rocks. And there was like a small like passageway, like blocked off by one of the main signs, no disabled loos, and they thought that was acceptable. So, you know, and I hear horror stories from people who want to do the whole F1 circuit. You know, they want to follow the F1 around the world, every single race 1 year. It's their ambition, it's their dream, and they're disabled and they just can't do it because it's just not, some of the circuits just aren't accessible. I don't think you could even get anywhere near it. So that's the ambition with the Accessible Podiums project with my commission. I want to make all of them so that they are accessible, so that it doesn't matter what your disability is, you can go and enjoy the F1 wherever you want to. So yeah.
And I assumed that you going up on the podium, was it 2018 British Grand Prix, and you went up on the podium, Kimi Räikkönen? I'm trying to, in the back of my mind, I think you were on the podium giving the trophy to Kimi Räikkönen, and you shook hands with Lewis Hamilton. That must have been a massive moment, not just for you, but for everybody involved in that whole movement.
Yeah, best day of my life. It was incredible. It was so cool. So that came out of the blue. I'd been to a trustee meeting with Motorsport UK to talk about my experience with the disabled licensing process. And David Richards had just taken on the chairman role at Motorsport UK, and he had invited all the trustees back to his house for dinner. And he invited me and my partner back as well. And he said, oh, come 15 minutes early, just so I can show you around so that you can be comfortable and make sure everything works for you. So we went early. It was that beautiful summer of 2018 that we all remember and hope that all of our future summers are going to be like that. Hasn't happened so far, but so the weather was gorgeous. We're in David's garden. We had a glass of champagne, and David said to me, are you going to the British Grand Prix this year? And this was I think it was in April. And I said, yes, I am. I'm going as guests of Motorsport UK on Saturday and guests of the FIA on Sunday. And he said, good, because you'll be presenting the third place trophy on the podium after the race. I didn't know what to say. I don't think I said anything for a long time. And I just said, oh my God, thank you. Because the third place trophy is historically given out by the chairperson of the ASN of the country. So the Motorsport UK is the ASN in the UK, for those that don't know. I can't remember what ASN stands for.
It's now you're putting me on the spot. And normally I've got my thing that I can just go, oh yeah, it's like the authority of local sports, basically, isn't it? Hang on,
yeah, it's something.
I'll Google it while you keep on going, and then I'll look really clever. This is like Jack and Jack.
I should know that.
Keep on going and entertain everybody, and I'll let you know.
Okay, so historically that's who gives the third place trophy out, and David Richards really supported what the FIA had done with the commission, what I was doing with the FIA, and wanted to give me more visibility so that we could really start to get the message out there. So obviously I was over the moon, and then David said at the end of it, but don't tell anyone because I haven't cleared it with Jean yet. And I was like, what if he says no? I knew he wouldn't, but I had to keep it a secret, because I told my dad because I knew he wouldn't tell anyone, but I couldn't tell my mum because I knew she'd tell all of my family.
I love she's a blab.
A little bit. But I was allowed to announce it the week before, and then the week leading up to that event was crazy. So I'm an ambassador for the Red Bull charity Wings for Life. It's a charity that searches for a cure for spinal injuries. And Wings for Life had asked me to go on their shooting day on the Wednesday to speak in front of all of Red Bull. So Daniel, Max, Christian, it was crazy. I was telling my story to Red Bull Racing. It was incredible. And then I went to the Grand Prix ball, the F1 ball in London that evening and spoke on stage then, which an incredible day. I was so privileged to be able to do that for the charity. And Christian had said that I could have hospitality in the Red Bull truck, whatever it is, truck's not
motorhome,
motor
location,
the Red Bull thing. So that was fantastic. And on the Saturday, I had a big chat with Max, and I told him that I wanted to either present the trophy to him or Kimi, because they're my two favourite drivers. And Max was amazing. He was just like a regular guy. We were chatting about the Carrera Cup race. And at the end of the day, I saw Kimi in the paddock, and he was being harassed by some crazy super fan. And I thought, right, I'm not going to get another chance. So I rolled up to him and said, "Hi, Kimi, my name's Nathalie McGloin. I'm president of the Disability and Accessibility Commission, and I'm presenting the third place trophy on the podium tomorrow." And I got the impression that he kind of looked at me and went, "Crazy woman in a wheelchair, of course she is." Like, so I said, "Can I have a photo?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "How did you do?" Because I hadn't seen qualifying. And he said, "I finished third." And I said, "Well, I might be presenting the trophy to you then." And he said, "Well, if you are, you want to get yourself a different trophy because I don't want to come third." And I thought, well, fair enough. And then, so the Sunday rolled around and I was so nervous because it was really hot. And I thought, because of my disability, I can't sweat. So I really worried that I might faint on the podium or something. It was like all these stupid things went through my head. But I was okay, fortunately. But I went up on the podium, and as the drivers came on, they don't look at the dignitaries. They just look at the crowd and wave. So no one had seen me. And I was kind of stuck behind this little podium thing that held the trophies. So when it was my turn to present the trophy, I turned the corner with the trophy on my lap, and Kimi saw me, and his face just completely changed. He just a massive smile. He said, "Oh, it's you." And I said, "Well, I told you I was going to be here." And he jumped down, and like the trophy was quite big, and he helped me kind of like give it to him. And then he shook my hand, and then Seb got down and shook my hand, and so did Lewis. And they all posed for a photo with me after. And it was the most incredible day ever. And I think it was so important that was visible, because the amount of messages that I had, that Motorsport UK had after that event, from people either wanting to know how they could get involved in motorsport, or just saying thank you for representing someone like me at the Grand Prix. You know, they'd seen someone in a wheelchair on the podium, and suddenly it had changed their perspective of how people with disabilities were viewed. And I don't think I've really grasped how big that was, how positive it was for the disabled community. And I am so grateful to David Richards and John Todd for allowing that to happen and giving the disabled community a really positive outlook about our sport that we love. So it was incredible. Thank you for letting me tell that story. I know I go way over the top, but I love the day so much.
I think everybody who's watching this or is watching the record on Facebook will be more than happy to have listened to that and indulge in it thoroughly, because it's fascinating. ASN, by the way, take you right back to the very beginning. You should know this, Natalie, because it comes from a French acronym. It's the National Sporting Authorities. Okay. So not that, I mean, the hard work that went into looking for that didn't really warrant the reward personally, but there we go. More questions. Anna Maria says, W Series going to F1 weekends. In which way will that help women who are working to have the same opportunities than men?
So I think that the question confuses me a little bit. But I think what is she trying to say, how will this help women just in motorsport in general?
Yeah, I think so. Let's make it that anyway. Sorry, Anna Maria, if that's not what you meant, but we're gonna run with that.
I think that's what she means. Hopefully that's what she means. I think, like I said about disabled people and visibility, W Series going to F1 is huge. The visibility that people will have by seeing those women race around those circuits is going to be massive. And it's not only going to be massive for women, it's going to be massive for all of motorsport, because it's F1, and the W Series has got a slot, and I think it's 8 races, isn't it? So it's not just a feature race, it's a good proportion of that calendar. So I think the more we see women doing anything in motorsport, whether it's presenting, whether it's driving, whether it's mechanic, engineer, volunteers and officials, the more we see, the more people will want to be involved, the more people will start taking the opportunity to do things in motorsport, the more females will start doing that. And the more females we have in, the more men will start to acknowledge, if they don't already, that this is a sport for all of us. So I think there's a massive, massive opportunity here for real change from kind of right down at grassroots level, where kids will start to see that women can do this. So I think it is amazing, and I can't wait for it to happen next year.
Can't believe I actually had to argue that point with someone the other day. I was like, come on, there's no negative to this, but there we go. Right, Chloe Grant says, what has been the hardest challenge that you have had to face within motorsport?
The hardest challenge I've had to face in motorsport is my own self-belief. I think when I first started racing, I had no expectations. Well, that's a lie. I did think that it was a possibility that I could win my first race, which was so ridiculous.
Yeah, but that mindset is what has made you the person you are today, surely.
I didn't vocalize it, but I thought, what if I'm that good that I actually win my first ever race? Which I came 14th out of 21, which was pretty good for Porsche Club, but I didn't win. But since then, I think the more I've been involved in motorsport, the more pressure I've put on myself, because I can't ever settle for second best. I always want to be the best at everything, and it's a strength and a weakness, that way of thinking. But after my crash in 2017, where I lost all of my confidence, the hardest thing for me to do was to actually fall back in love with motorsport again, because I almost quit at the end of 2017. I remember being at Croft in my car with my race instructor, and he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "I would rather be anywhere else in the world right now than in this race car at this track." And I didn't want to do the race the next day. I honestly hated every second of it. And I decided that if I still felt like that at the end of the year, then I'd stop. But I did manage to enter into a race at the end of that season that brought all of the confidence and all of the passion, and everything that I loved about the sport was just, it was reignited. But that was the hardest thing I had to do, because, I've had wobbles in rugby, which is fine, but you have wobbles in a wheelchair rugby chair, and you potentially miss a ball that's thrown to you as you go over the goal line, and you feel a bit rubbish, and you perhaps miss a push, or you get the play wrong, and turnovers happen. In motorsport, if you get it wrong and you don't have the confidence, you could crash your car. So it's not only expensive, but there are big consequences to not driving in the way that you should. So that was the hardest thing, and I'm so happy that I overcame it. I mean, I still struggle with it a little bit, but it's mainly if I've been out of the car for too long, and then I think, what if I've forgotten how to drive again? And then I get back in and I'm like, why aren't I on the pace straight away? But it's stupid high expectations, or I'm too hard on myself. So it's easily manageable by just being realistic and being a bit softer, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah, I can understand that it is. Do you feel more vulnerable in the car because of your disability at times, or is it exactly the same, do you think, for anybody getting in a car with confidence?
I don't really know the answer to that question, because obviously I don't know what other people feel like, and I have learned in motorsport that I'm way too honest. like so many times you'll see people come in from a rubbish session and they've been really slow, and they'll lie about their times and they'll go, oh yeah, really, really good for tomorrow. And I'll be like, well, I've just seen what you, like your car, there's something wrong with your car. Like, surely they're not your lap times. But they won't admit it. Whereas me, I'll come in, I'll be like, I'm off the pace. I'm not feeling it. I'm 10 miles an hour too slow through that corner. I'm lifting there, and I'll let it all out. And Andrew, my boyfriend's like, don't. He's like, everyone lies. Just, if you can't lie, just don't say anything. I don't know. I think everyone feels vulnerable when their confidence down in a race car. Whether I do any more because of my disability, I don't know. I'd like to think not, because I kind of think that I'm a bit stronger than that. But maybe there's a bit of that there.
So you're so strong. I have been watching some of your workouts online that you've posted, and to say it's remarkable doesn't do it justice, because I'm possibly one of the laziest people ever. And I have no excuse for that, apart from the fact that I'm a mum and I work quite hard. You have so much going on in your life. How do you maintain with a disability that need to train, and even on your bad days? How do you do it?
So here's some of my honesty coming out here.
Uh-oh.
What you see on Instagram is definitely not reality. It's all of people's best bits. I might go into the gym some days and do like a bit of a workout, and then I'll film some of it and I'll put it on Instagram, and then I'll go, do you know what? I can't be bothered to do it anymore. And I go in and I'll be annoyed with myself, because I'll be like, you didn't do a full session. But then, it is tough. Being a tetraplegic is very time consuming, because my hands don't work properly. So I haven't got full finger dexterity. So I'm forever dropping things. Like doing up a shoelace takes me like 5 times as long as it would do if I had full hand function. So my biggest disadvantage is time. That my spinal injury has taken away the luxury of time and spontaneity from me. So yeah, some days it is tough, and I'm my own worst enemy. That some days I will organise a schedule that is completely unattainable, and then I'll beat myself up that it doesn't get fulfilled, and then like the next 2 days and nothing on. So I'm, it's difficult, but I think everyone has their priorities and things that are difficult in their lives. Like you've just said, you're a mum, you've got a very demanding job, you juggle what you can juggle, and sometimes the balls fall on the floor, but you pick them up and you start again. So I think I'm in the same position as anyone. We do what we can, we try to be the best that we can, and Instagram is only the best bits.
Unless you're me, in which case I'm equally like you, far too honest, and I put like me looking like absolute just terrible. I'm like, oh yeah, let's take a picture of that, I've just burnt toast, take a picture of that. I'm like the anti-Instagram, but I think that's fine. Right, another question's come in. How do the likes of Billy Munger's very visible accident and recovery help your mandate, and do you think we will see more drivers like him or other females reaching F2, F3, or maybe even Formula One?
I hope so. Like Billy is incredible. The way he dealt with his accident, I was a similar age to him when I was injured. Just if I had someone like Billy to look up to when I'd been injured, I think I would have been really, really fortunate, because even for non-disabled people, I think everyone can take inspiration of how Billy dealt with that and how he came back. And yes, I do hope that we see more disabled drivers get into single seaters, because after all, Billy changed that legislation that allowed disabled drivers to compete in single seaters. And I don't think there's any reason why we won't see a disabled driver in Formula One. I think we have to be realistic about the types of disability that could achieve a Formula One drive. I couldn't get there because I don't have the finger dexterity or enough hands to operate all of the buttons and the different mechanical aspects of driving an F1 car. But Robert Kubica's done it. You know, he's effectively driving with one hand. I know two, but his injured arm is nowhere near as functional as his non-injured arm, and the demands of an F1 driver are fairly substantial. But I do think that we are going to see disabled drivers competing at high levels in sports cars, in single seaters. I mean, there are already people doing it, you just don't hear about them. I've got a friend who has this very similar level of injury to me, and he won his class at VLN last year. I mean, he's incredible. He's so quick, and he's been racing Creventic for years and years, and he races as part of an able-bodied team. He just, you know, he's just a driver. So, and the Instagram account that the FIA Disability and Accessibility Commission has just gained in September will expose more of these people. And I think that we just need to start shouting about it. So it's not going to be something that's going to be like, oh, and finally we've pushed through to a disabled driver making it to the top. It's happening. We just need more of it to happen.
Okay, so I've got two more questions for you. The first one would be, if people are interested, and lots of people have obviously asked this question, if people are interested in getting into motorsport and they just happen to have a disability, what would be your advice for kind of entry level and how easy it might be for them?
So this is a difficult question because there aren't lots of opportunities for disabled people to get involved with motorsport. I am going to talk about my charity here because this is one of the routes in. So Spinal Track gives disabled novices their first track day or rally driving experience. So I think if you have the equipment, if you have a car that is accessible, well, not accessible, it's suitable for track driving, if you want to get into motorsport, take your car out on the track. Because I think with disabled people, it's difficult because we have to invest heavily before we've even tried something to see if we enjoy it, because there aren't many disabled organisations that you can try out racing. So the investment up front is different to a non-disabled driver. But if you are disabled and you want to have a go, have a look at Spinal Track. We're also working behind the scenes with some of the kind of club level racing series to try and see if we can get an adapted car into one of the series so that there is a route from kind of Spinal Track up into first step of racing, to see that we can do that maybe next year. And with the FIA, it's something that I'm trying desperately to develop a pathway in for disabled drivers to at least sample what motorsport is and hopefully take it further. So at the moment, Spinal Track, and keep posted for more opportunities that will be happening soon.
Good stuff. And finally, what's the best part of your job? I suppose which job that comes to is, I don't know which in reference that is. Maybe just what's the best part of doing what you do?
There's not just one best part. There are some of the kind of like materialistic parts that I love, which I'm not embarrassed to kind of like say, like the stuff with the FIA I do, and the stuff that I get to go to and see, and the people I know because of it is incredible. Like if you told me that this would happen when I first started racing, I just wouldn't believe you. So that's really cool. I love all of that stuff, and you know, working with the FIA as well is a massive privilege, and I'll always be grateful for that, and I'll never take it for granted. But some of the other stuff I do, like the Spinal Track stuff, seeing people's faces when they are given the opportunity to go out round Silverstone in a track car, or seeing their parents' faces. I mean, we had one guy once who injured at 16, same level as injury as me, I think he was from the Isle of Man, had done, Isle of Wight, he'd done all of like the highest like road driving accreditation, you know, like all of his high, I don't know what you call it, you know, the extra driving license thing.
The bit that they just show off at to say that you've got really good skills in the wet.
Pretty much. He'd done all of that and was a massive petrol head and had been on the spinal track list for a while. He came to Silverstone and Andrew was on the pit wall with his dad, and he went down the down the pit straight. And Andrew just looked at his dad and he had tears rolling down his face because he never thought he would see his son in a track car driving around Silverstone. And it's stuff like that with spinal track is so heartwarming, and it's the reason why we work so hard to keep it going. But also driving a Porsche around any of the circuits is a massive high point. I love my car. I love racing. I love what I do.
Nathalie, it's been an absolute delight to speak to you. You're such an inspiration. You're such a busy lady. Give yourself a break every now and then. I feel like I need to say that to you, but it's just been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. So thank you ever so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been ace. I really enjoyed it.
Good. We'll also say at this point, thank you very much to Girls on Track UK and to Motorsport UK for making all of these events possible during this strange lockdown period that we are. I think these webinars are such a great way of reaching out, connecting and kind of feeling almost normal again. Thank you, as I said, to Nathalie for your time, and thank you to all of you who have been watching. It's always fascinating to hear all of your questions, and hopefully we've managed to answer as many of them as possible. This has been recorded, so shout about it to your friends, your family, give them the link if you can do. It'll be available in the closed Girls on Track UK community Facebook group following the event, so get people to sign up for that as well, and look out for next month's virtual event, which will be announced after this webinar finishes. So exciting. It'll be Christmassy and everyone will be drinking mulled wine with Santa Claus hats on. It'll be fabulous. Nathalie, once again, thank you so much. We wish you the best of luck with all your endeavours, and to everybody watching, thank you for your time. We hope you've enjoyed it, and bye for now.
Bye.